All right, it looks like we are live. It is Monday, January 14th, 2019. If you're watching this live, why is this not loading? Oh, cool, there we go. Go ahead and say hello and let me know what you did this weekend. Say hello and share one thing that you did this weekend. And while you do that, I am going to share this on my other Facebook pages. If you have some friends, some family, some coworkers that you'd like to invite to join us, feel free to do so too. We'd love to have them here. And then we're going to dive into guilt. This week is going to be all about guilt. And let me just get this. So be sure to say hello. Let me know. And why don't you share one thing that you did this weekend that you really enjoyed? One thing you enjoyed about this weekend. My thing I enjoyed about this weekend was it was kind of I live in Southern California, the really pretty part of Southern California, not LA area or anything like that, but not to knock on LA, I shouldn't say that, but it's, not traffic and mountains and trees and ocean stuff. And the thing that I really enjoyed about this weekend was it was kind of overcast and stormy. We never really get it. So it feels like winter, as close as we can get to winter here in Southern California. It felt kind of like winter. So that's mine. What about you? What's something that you want to share about your weekend? All right, that's it for me. I got all those posted. Let's see who's on here. Linda. Hey, Linda. I feel like I haven't seen you in forever. Suzanne, what's up, Suzanne? Read and made lots of notes. I know you have lots of notes. Planning a girls' vacation. Very cool. Where are you going? Where are you off to? Hey, Stacy, good to see you on here. Marie, what's up, Marie? Worked all weekend. Very cool. How was work? I worked a decent amount this weekend, too. Oh. Lisa, family time in the UK. Awesome. Chris, what's up, Chris? Oh, snowing. We didn't quite get snow here. We didn't quite get that wintry. What book are you reading? Hey, Melissa. Had a great get-together with sweet friends, sending my son off to college. Oh, very cool. That's awesome. I bet that meant so much to him. Thank you for sharing, and congratulations to him for making it into college. That's a huge accomplishment. All right. Welcome, everybody, and thank you so much for being here. It is an absolute pleasure to spend this time with you. A couple quick updates before we dive in. Number one is if you haven't signed up for the email reminders, I just posted that link. Hey, Heather, what's up? You can do that here. And what we'll do is we'll do with the reminders. Those of you who have been getting the reminders, have they been helpful? Every probably Friday, Saturday or so, I will send you out the schedule for the coming week. That way you can mark it off on your calendar. You can plan all the topics that are going to be covered and everything. So it's just going to be a short email that you get from me. But it's a great way to make sure you stay up on top of this. Also, be sure to like, subscribe, and make sure subscribe to the live so you get a notification from Facebook, YouTube when I go on. Huge favor to ask of all of you. Interact with this throughout. If you're pushing the emoji button, even if you just type in comments and say, wow, that was interesting. Or if I ask you, hey, is this making sense? Just comment, because what happens is when you do that, it populates, as I understand it, it tells the formula behind the scenes, whatever it is, that there's something of value here. There's something worth sharing. And then Facebook, YouTube, whatever, will promote it out to more people. And then it gives more people an opportunity. And that's how we'll grow our community. So your interaction, your shares are going to really help make that happen. Also, wins. I'm getting ahead of myself. Goals for this week. What goals do you have for this week? Remember, one of the things we want to do on Mondays is we want to kick the week off by setting a goal for ourselves. It could be something related to what we're talking about. It could be something that you're working on in your business. It could be something you're working on in your personal life. It could be something you're working on in your romantic life. So the purpose of this, to have the space, is to share a goal here. And that way, everybody that logs in can, one, hold you accountable, but two, I've already seen I saw people from Europe. I saw somebody on here from, gosh, where wasn't somebody else on here from Australia? But anyways, we have people on here from multiple countries, multiple continents, multiple states, all different walks of life, different industries, different things, different fields of expertise. So by posting your goal for the week on here, what this is going to do is it's going to allow you to, one, not only have accountability, but two, it puts it out there for other people to see it. And somebody may be watching this live or in the replay who could help you achieve that goal. So I could message Heather, and Heather shares her goal, and I say, oh, hey, Heather, blah, blah, blah. Or Suzanne just said she's going to go to Italy and she's planning a girls trip to Italy. I could say, oh, Suzanne, I have a client that's in Italy who does all these things with the Italian government. Maybe they could hook you up with some stuff, right? And so that's what we want to look at with this being a supportive kind of environment. So I really encourage you to utilize that. And I think that's it for updates. First of all, I want to ask real quick. Those of you who are on the lives, all of them or one of them last week, was last week's lives, were they helpful for you? Did it all make sense? Did anybody have any questions about that? Hey, Linda, good to see you on here. And let's see, I'll just let you post those. This week's focus is going to be on guilt. I would say guilt is something that if there's one thing that I still feel challenged with and struggle with at time to time, it's definitely guilt. And I will get more into that. I'm not going to get so much into that today, but I will get more into that over the next coming days. And Thursday, I will definitely do a more deeper dive into guilt and my own story with it. So this is one that's near and dear to my heart. Very helpful. Okay, cool. Thanks, Linda, Christine, and Carrie. I appreciate that. Next week, we're going to go into, I think next week might be on getting unstuck. But anyways, we'll get to next week when it's time. So let's dive into the guilt today. A couple things. Take notes. I encourage you to take notes. You're going to learn more. You're going to retain more. And then ask questions, whether you're asking them as I'm talking or at the end, I'll have some time for questions. But please, please, please ask questions. The reason being is because your question, I guarantee you that somebody else on here is going to have the same question or a similar question. And it furthers the discussion. I think all of us who have been on here can agree that as good as, or as not so good as these lives may be, I think they're decent. So I'll pat myself on the back for that. They're always made better. They're enhanced by your questions, by your discussion. So let's just be open to asking questions and encouraging and share. All right. Without further ado, let's dive into guilt. I wanted to start today. So today we're going to really look at the who, what, where, when, why, how of guilt. And then we're going to start working with some strategies on dealing with guilt over the rest of the week. But I want to open up with the definition of guilt according to the dictionary. And I think right off the bat, this is one of the things that's going to be a challenge for us, because the dictionary defines guilt as, and I'm reading this quote, the fact of having committed a specified or implied offense or crime. The fact of having committed a specified or implied offense or crime. And the other one, so it's a noun. The verb is to make someone feel guilty, especially in order to induce them to do something. To make someone feel guilty, especially in order to induce them or to do something. I hate both of these definitions. I'll just throw that out there. I absolutely despise them both, and here's why. Because when we're talking about the emotional feeling of guilt, to equate our thoughts, because guilt, here's the thing, we don't even have to do anything to feel guilty. Easy example. How many of you on here, and please be honest, I'm going to be first to stick my hand up extremely high, so I'm not just doing this to encourage you to ask, I'm putting both hands up because I will say this is me. How many of you on here felt a tremendous amount of guilt when you were little kids? At some time in your life? How many of you on here felt a tremendous amount of guilt when you were little kids? Guilt for something that you may or may not have even done. I know for me, so much of my guilt was not even for things I had done. It was just my perception of how my role was in my parents' life and how it was affecting them and how it was negatively impacting them. So I felt a tremendous amount of guilt. for that. I didn't even do anything. So the reason I hate this definition is because if it's a noun, one version of it is it's saying that my emotion is because I committed a crime. That's a horrible thing to leverage on someone, to imply that you feel this emotion because you're a criminal. Okay. And that's not necessarily how we emotionally experience it, but that's the kind of cloud that hovers over guilt and as we learn it. And two, to say that we're making someone do something, we make someone feel guilty, we're making them. If any of you have followed me on social media for a while, if you've attended any of these before, you know I still do yep. Okay, so this is a universal thing. Lots. Yes, Catholic guilt. Okay, cool. So we're all in the same place. And thank you, everybody, for contributing. Oh, I like the little emojis, too. That's great. So, okay, this is a universal thing. How many of us, we felt that guilt and we didn't even do anything, right? But yet we're put in that label of being criminal. That's a freaking heavy burden to carry the rest of our life, which is why guilt will be nagging and so persistent, because we emotionally assign this value to it that we reserve for criminals. We put criminals, murderers, and those types of things, right? And we equate it at that kind of same level. Not true. The other thing is to make someone feel guilty. Those of you who have been following me a while, have attended these, you know that from the teachings and from the discussions we have, we can't make someone feel anything, right? How they feel is how they feel, and they're feeling what they're feeling as a response to their perception of what we're saying or doing. We're not holding others hostage to their feelings. They're free to feel whatever they choose to feel. Now, at times, it can seem that way. If I were to sit on here, I'm going to pick on Linda right now because Linda will be totally down with this. If I were to tell Linda and I said, hey, Linda, you just put a thumbs up on there and your thumbs up is stupid, right? Your thumbs up is stupid. Now, Linda could choose to, if Linda wanted to, I know she won't do this, but because I trust her, but if she were to choose to, she could choose to feel guilty, and then she could point the finger at me and say, you made me feel guilty because you were sitting there telling us that we need to put these emojis up there, but then you filled them up there, and now I feel bad for even doing it. I felt like I ruined your Facebook Live because I put the emoji up there. I feel like I blew things up. I felt like I did something horrible because of that. Well, I didn't make her feel that way. She was just responding to my feedback. She could have equally have said something like, well, wait a minute, I know Jesse. I've attended his lives. I've worked with him before. And I know that he's not usually that kind of person that would just put me down. Maybe he's going through a rough time. Maybe he's having a bad day. I hope he's okay. Or wow, that's really cool that Jesse trusts me enough to use me as an example. That feels really good. See, she had multiple choices to choose how she wanted to feel, how she responded. And it didn't have to be guilty. So I don't like it to say that we can make someone feel guilty. I think that's very misleading. So I want to offer you all an alternative definition to guilt that you can play around with, and maybe it gives you a way to conceptualize this differently. So I typically define guilt as like this. We feel guilt because we believe that there is something else we could have done. We feel guilt because we believe that there was a alternative that we could have done. We could have done more. We could have helped more. There was something more we could have done. Or another way of looking at it is there's an alternative choice we could have made. Or we perceive that there was a better choice that we could have made. And this is where guilt comes from. It's not because we're criminals. It's not because we're making people do anything. It's because at our core belief, we believe that there was another alternative we could have there was a better alternative out there, that there was something more we could have done, that there was a better choice we could have made. Does this make sense? Is that helpful? Do you understand kind of the subtle differences between the dictionary definition and that definition I just gave you? And again, just to briefly touch on with my parents as an example, and maybe many of you can relate to this too, and I'll get more into personal stories about guilt later. I don't want to do that too much today. Much of my guilt I felt, and I've shared bits and pieces of this to make sense. Cool. It was in relating to my family growing up, was because I had this perception that I formed this belief that if I wasn't there, my parents would be happy because they wouldn't have to pay money. So my guilt came from my belief that, and I carried around because when I was down and the woods behind my house around 8 years old with a knife to my heart, I had this belief that if I was gone, it would make them happy. But then when I was too scared to follow through with it, I began to believe that whatever pain that they would go through was on me. It was because of me. And so my belief was that there was something else I should have done. There was a better choice. And that better choice was I should have killed myself and then my parents could have been happy. So that was a source of my guilt. Does that make sense? So it wasn't so much that I saw myself as a criminal or I was a criminal. It wasn't that I was making myself, although there was times where I felt like I was being made to feel guilty because I didn't understand this. We didn't get taught this in school. But it was because at the core, I believed that there was a better alternative. There was a better choice I should have made. There was a choice I could have made that would have helped other people, that would have made my parents happier. And that's why I felt guilty. So that's kind of, I just want to define that because that's going to be the framework we're going to work with guilt. We're going to work with guilt in, if I could speak this week as we go through this series on guilt. And thank you everybody who's commenting. I so appreciate your interaction. Thank you so much. So sources of guilt. Where does guilt come from? Children can start to feel guilt as young as 3 to 5 years old, typically. I think it's one of the first, probably, and most intense emotions that we can experience in childhood. I know it was for me, and it sounds like by seeing so many of you comment, it's one's for you. Now, think about how crazy that is, right? 3 to 5 years old. I don't know about you all, but for me, I don't have a lot of really vivid memories from 3 to 5 years old. There's memories in there for sure, but the timeline of them is kind of intermixed. I don't know if this was when I was 3, this was when I was 5, if this was when I was 7, right? It's kind of all blended together. But I can remember vividly, viscerally, how it felt to feel guilty. I know that there were things that happened, right? It wasn't just all of a sudden I woke up one day and said, oh, I feel so guilty. I need to end my life so my parents will be happy. I know that I had been carrying that emotion, that pain for a long time to finally get me to the point to make that decision. I don't have necessarily memories right off the top of my head of what those experiences were, but the emotion was there. I was probably more intimately aware of and more intimately connected to feelings of guilt than maybe I was of love, other things. And even though it's interesting, like I can remember, right? I remember more vividly being down there like this with a knife to my heart than a lot of the instances that way parents would have been showing me love. And I know my parents loved me. I know they were doing the best they could with what they had. And I know all those things, but I don't remember that and the emotion of it to the degree of guilt, because I think guilt becomes such a present and powerful force in our life. We don't have blueprints when we're growing up about what to do when we feel certain emotions, right? What do we do when we react and we respond? Because everything in life happens because of meaning, right? My meaning I made of my parents being upset was because of me. Somebody reacts and gets upset because of something that we did. We make it mean that we're a failure, that we're a screw up, that we're hurtful, we're harmful. And then somebody else can make it be like, the meaning I put behind it is that person is just a jerk and they deserved it. Right? It's why when we go and we drive through traffic or something and somebody cuts us off, and if we go by them and we turn over and we glare, right? Anybody's done that. Oh, this asshole, and we turn over and just give them a really good glare because we know that's going to fix everything. And some people might be completely indignant. They might return the salute, the two-fingered salute back at us, and other people might be totally apologetic, and they might be, oh, I'm so sorry. Right? Because in the moment, they make meaning out of it. The meaning they make is, that person had no business honking on me, or, oh, I totally screwed up. My gosh, I know what it feels like. I'm so sorry. I feel guilty. Is this making sense so far? So, sources of guilt. We can feel these. We can start feeling these feelings of guilt as early as 3 to 5 years old, and it is one of the most intensely and intimate emotions that we can feel, I think, through our developmental years and carry it into our big kid years and to where we are today, which is why many of us still may struggle with it or feel challenges with it, because these things become so become so ingrained in our biology and our DNA and of our day-to-day behaviors. We learn how to make do. We learn how to live, exist, coexist with guilt. And for it to not be there might seem almost completely foreign, right? So sources. Guilt can come from a plethora of things. I said that just now. It's a plethora, but I was watching the show the other day and the guy was saying plethora. And it's now, since he said it like that, I was laughing at the way the guy said it. I find myself saying it. That's a complete aside. Any of you have ever watched that show on Netflix right now called Murder Mountain? The reason I watched it is because it's filmed where I grew up. And so there's this one guy in there, and he talks about plethora. And I just say, so now, anyways, I'm getting off track. Tangent over. So sources of it. Guilt can come from so many different sources. And part of the reason that it comes from so many different sources is because, again, nobody's teaching us. There's no blueprint about how to understand our emotions, how we can control and influence our thoughts, how we can have emotional choice, how we're supposed to respond. We all kind of get the same crash course in being a human, right? Which is we should obey the commands of our elders. We should look up and respect the people, teachers, parents, peer group, grandparents, whomever. We're supposed to listen to them. We're supposed to mind them. And we get told no because we're doing something wrong, right? And so then we start to get told no. The meaning we think is, oh, I'm doing something wrong. And then we do something and then we see somebody react in a different way. Now we're doing something wrong and they get sad. So this whole domino effect happens. And then we start to feel guilt for a host of things. To the degree of we can feel guilty because, well, I mean, really anything. I mean, if I were to poll all of you on here, we could probably have some pretty ridiculous on paper stories about things we feel guilty over. Ridiculous meaning that if we looked at them and we were just sitting here talking, we said, God, why would you feel guilty on that? That's crazy. That's nothing. But we learned to be so intimate with the emotion, and it became, for many of us, it became our default place to go. Because if we did something bad, wrong, imperfect, whatever it was, we should immediately feel guilty for it because we're letting other people down. We immediately feel guilty for it because it means we're bad little boys, bad little girls. That's what we've been taught. We immediately feel guilty because it means that we're not enough, we're not lovable. So the list goes on and on. I remember one time I put a post up on Facebook. And well, this is popping up, so I'll go with it. I remember one time, this was several years ago, I put a post up on Facebook, and at the time I had this program, which I still have it, called the Fat Eradicating System, and it was a program, an exercise and nutrition program people could do from home, and they could buy it, and it was a really popular program when I was still doing personal training and whatnot. But a lot of people had it. A lot of people got a lot of really great results from it, and I think there's a couple folks on here who did it too. And there was a couple different photos and images I'd use to market it. And I have kind of an irreverent sense of humor. Any of you have ever, heard me talk before, I've come to these lives, you'll hear me make jokes, and I'm pretty open with it. I love South Park. Part of the reason I love South Park is because South Park's humor is so irreverent. It's funny, and I think it's South Park kind of is equal opportunity in making fun of everyone. And there's one photo I put, and it was of this big, really big guy, and he was on one of those spits that you'd have at a barbecue, and the guy was probably looked like he's 200-300 pounds overweight, and he was getting cooked over this fire, and it was obviously kind of a joke thing somebody put on there, and then I had put on there, somebody had made it for me, and then I used it and said, this is the wrong way to try to burn fat. Use the fat eradicating system instead, right? Simple, seemed like harmless. And it happened, one day I happened to put that up, and it was a couple weeks after one of my best friend was killed in a car crash. And my best friend was killed in a car crash. And at the time, there was a lot of propaganda going around that my friend was a very well-known public figure. And there was a lot of propaganda going around that he had been burned while he was still alive. And so when I put that up there, I had people who didn't even know my friend, right? They would sit there and write me and tell me what an insensitive asshole I was. How could I do that? Who the fuck are you? Everything I thought about you is just a lie. I'm not going to follow you. I can't tell you how many FUs I had flooding my inbox at that time, right? They don't even know him. It's my best friend, and I'm the one getting told these things. And I felt that for a little bit. I felt this tremendous guilt. I thought, oh my God, am I a horrible person? Am I just completely insensitive? Am I completely checked out? Not because I was taking in the moment, like, gosh, in this time of me losing this person, I should be taking care of everybody else. And so I started to feel guilty. I can even say they made me feel guilty. But on paper, it's almost ridiculous to think that I'm responsible for everybody else, right? And so, as an example, the reason it's bright, and I'm sorry, I'm getting a little sidetracked with it. I didn't expect that to be the example that comes up. The bigger point of it is that we can experience, we can express, we can feel these feelings of guilt from just about anything. We can feel it from, being late to an appointment. We can feel it from not understanding our spouse, right? Our spouse says, "Hey, can you can you be somewhere on time?" We say, "Yeah, absolutely," because we're not really paying attention. We show up 10 minutes late and they're pissed off at us. We feel guilty. Gosh, we're insensitive. We didn't listen. We can feel guilty because we didn't turn the TV off before we left. We can feel guilty because we left the lights on, because we're thinking about, we can feel guilty if we don't clean our plates. Gosh, I struggled with this when I was a kid. I don't know about all of you, but I would get the story about the starving kids over in Africa, or there's people going hungry, and I need to make sure I ate every single morsel. Part of the reason I was chunky, really chunky as a kid, I was, probably 40 pounds overweight growing up as a kid at one point. And the reason being is because I grew up with that of, I would feel guilty if I didn't waste it, because I was taking away food from the people across the world who were starving. I felt horribly guilty. I still sometimes struggle with it today, and I will overeat because I think in my mind, I can hear my mom going, "There's starving people. Don't waste your food. Don't waste your food." So guilt can come from all these sources. It can come from the loss of a loved one. Somebody dies, and we feel guilty. We feel like there was more we should have done. We feel like there was more we could have done. When my friend Gabe committed suicide, I felt just tremendous guilt initially. I felt like I should have known. I should have recognized the signs. I should have been more present. I should have reached out more. When my dad died unexpectedly, same thing. There was this huge amount of guilt. God, I had all this time with my dad. I should have. Why did I have to hold on to the things I was upset with him about? Why did I have to make these agendas? Why did I have to be angry at him? Why did I have to be this? Why couldn't I have opened up more? The guilt can come from relationships, right? We have these people in our life who we often will put the most emotion into. And so then if we hurt them, they get hurt by something we do or not do, we can feel tremendously guilty about it. So we start to conduct ourselves in a way. Any of you on here have ever been in a relationship where you do things in your relationship because of guilt, right? So we start to do things not because we genuinely want to, not because we love the person and we're doing it from a place of love, we're doing it from a place of obligation, because we now feel guilty for doing it or not doing it. We can feel guilty because we act differently than somebody's expectations of us were, right? So going back to my example, I talked to my friends. For some reason, these people who didn't even know my friend, they had these expectations that I should just be a completely different person than I'd always been. And I should have, and then because their expectations were different than who I really was, I started to feel guilty because I wasn't measuring up to these expectations of people who I didn't even know. How many of us on here have ever felt guilty because of strangers? How many of us have ever felt guilty on here because we're not meeting some expectation? You could feel guilty for getting bad grades in school. I have a vivid memory of fifth grade. I got an F on one paper. I got straight A's all through elementary school, junior high. There was one paper, like a spelling test or something, or a math test, and it wasn't because I didn't understand it. It was because I got one of the steps wrong, and I got an F on it. The teacher had even written on there, see me afterwards, because they had been grading my work for so long, and they knew I had just probably made a mistake, and they were going to give me a chance to make it up. I remember telling my mom with it. I can remember vividly. We were in this store, and I told her, and I was hanging my head. I felt so ashamed. And I felt ashamed because she had told me I need to always get good grades. And because my mom had thought if I had a good education, then I would have a better life than she had. And I felt so guilty that I was letting her down. I remember my mom saying something to the effect of, well, you better not let it happen again. And, she looked visibly disappointed in me. I felt tremendous guilt from that, from getting a one bad grade, right? One bad grade. So how many of us, right, we feel these guilts from all these different places, all these different things. We can feel this guilt. Guilt will manufacture in so many ways, shapes, or forms. And the motivation always behind it is because we believe at some core that there was a better alternative. There was something else we should have, would have, could have done better, could have done differently. But here's the thing. Each and every single one of us, right now in this moment and every other moment to come, we are always doing the best we can with what we have in any given moment. See, let's just assume all of us have had the equivalent of like a high school level of education. So 12 years of formal education or whatever it is. In this moment, we're not calling on all that knowledge. We're just calling on what resources we have available to us right now. Because when we're talking about a subject like this, it's bringing up different things for all of us. Me talking about some of my childhood stuff or losses I've incurred. It could be bringing up personal memories for you. Some of you might have memories popping up right now of things that you haven't thought about in years. Incidentally, is anybody having that? You're having a memory pop up now that you haven't thought of in years, of the time that you felt extremely guilty, something that you haven't thought about, but it's been triggered because of the topic that we're talking about here. See, in that moment, I see one hand popping up. In that moment, we're feeling this guilt because we have this perception that we should have, would have, could have done something different, that there was a better alternative available to us. But it's not true. It's true that we could argue ourselves with it. Like I could say that, yeah, if I could go back in time and had hindsight, I would have done things a lot differently. I could have seen things differently. But when I was in it, I couldn't. I could sit here. I would be lying to you all if I said, yeah, if I could go back in time with my dad, I'd do things differently. Well, that's assuming that I could go back in time knowing what I know now. If I were to go back in time and just start right over from the beginning, knowing what I knew then, nothing would likely be different because I was doing the best I could with what I had at that time. That was it. You were too. All of us were. But we took on this feeling of guilt because we felt guilty. We felt like we should have known better. We should have known different. We should have been more aware. We should have been more perceptive. We should have been more alert. We should have been more attuned. We were doing the best we could with what we had. When we were kids, especially, we were doing the best we could with what we have. We don't know any different. When we're adults, when we're big kids now, we're doing the best we can with what we have at any given moment. How you're responding to this right now. Some of you might be really into this. You might be vibing with this. Some of you might be thinking, Jesse's way out in La La Land today. Some of you might be, but it's because all of us in this moment, we're doing the best we can with what we have. And for some of you who are really resonating with this, you might have things that are popping up. Lines may be crossing, dots may be connecting. And for those of you who maybe you're not resonating with it so much, it might be because those dots aren't quite connecting or you have something distracted in the background that you're having to do. But either way, all of us are doing the best we can with what we have right now. The mental and emotional resources that we have available in this moment to make a split-second decision, right? And Unlock Your Greatness, we talk about, that's my live event that I would love for all of you to attend at some point. And we talk about that in any given moment, there's 2 million pieces of information entering into our unconscious mind through our senses, sight, taste, touch, sounds, smell, and even I would argue our sixth sense, our intuition. And of those 2 million pieces, we use about 127 of them to make up what we call reality. Literally 99.999% of the available information that's coming into us, we're filtering out because what our brain is trying to do is it's trying to make sense of things the best it can based on what we knew before. The reason why guilt will follow people, will follow you, has followed me at different times in our life, is because when we learn a program called guilt early on, when we learn that we should have, would have, could have done something different or better, no matter what happens in life, that until we work with that software, until we change the program, when we counter a similar circumstance, we're going to go right into guilt. Or if we're going to encounter something completely different that we haven't experienced before, but it's familiar enough, the emotional intensity is enough, we'll go to guilt. See, I had never really lost somebody significant until I lost my friend Gabe to suicide. But I knew right away how to feel guilt because I had such an expertise in feeling guilt for how my parents' relationships evolved and my felt like my contribution to that. I have in romantic relationships, I struggled with feelings of guilt constantly because I had a real expertise in romantic relationships and feeling like I was disappointing my mom, or that I wasn't doing enough to make her happy. And so I had this pattern, right, of not making my mom happy, enter into a romantic relationship, not making significant women figures in my life happy. It was almost be my default, right? My go-to. So this is why guilt comes around, guys. This is why we have it. This is why we get stuck with it. This is why it pops up. This is why that we do things even though we do our absolute best in something, and if it seems like we don't get the feedback we want, we start to feel guilty. This is why when we have this expectation of somebody, we go and we give and we do something kind for someone else and they don't respond in the way we expected, we might feel guilty. Oh, well, should I have done more? Could I have done more? Did I miss something? This is why we get into conflicts with our partners over the stupidest things, but we'll feel guilty afterwards because we have this voice, this belief that maybe we should have done more, maybe we could have done more. We're raised to believe that our choices that led to things turning out the way they were are almost criminal in nature. That because of us, somebody else went to suffer and they end up feeling how they felt. It's not true. People feel how they feel because that's how they choose to feel. Do we contribute? For sure, absolutely. But it's ultimately them that's choosing their emotional experience. Guilt may have been around a long time for many of you. I know it's definitely been around a long time for me. But it doesn't mean it has to always travel with you, nor does it have to be an always present point in your life. We can heal guilt. We can eliminate it. We can change our behaviors around it. We can heal from it. We can let it go. We can release ourselves from it. We can relieve ourselves from it. So that's what the rest of this week is really going to be about. It's going to be about diving into guilt. It's going to be about working through our guilt. It's going to be about going over tools and techniques to letting it go. It's going to be about understanding yourselves more and learning how to value an alternative to guilt. And I really hope that today, I know this one, we kind of jumped all over the place with stuff because I wanted to give you a broad overview of guilt. And the reason I did it this way is because that's kind of how guilt is, isn't it? It doesn't necessarily have a logical path to it and it jumps all over the place. But I wanted to try to teach today from that because I wanted to try to give you not just an overview of guilt, but almost like a demonstration of it in action. So I was really trying to tap into what was on my heart and what came through. So that's what I have for today. What questions do you all have? First of all, was this helpful? Is this helpful? Yes, no. And then what questions do you have? And then while I wait for you to talk about questions, reminder, tomorrow is going to be on why guilt and our biggest fears are a marriage that needs to end ASAP. Why guilt and our biggest fears is a marriage that needs to end ASAP. So tomorrow's going to be a big one. We're going to dive into guilt and its marriage with fear and how we can dissolve and end that marriage ASAP. Lastly, and then I'll get to questions. So go ahead and start typing your questions in. Facebook Live registration page. To get on the email reminder list, you can use that. I have 3 strategy sessions open for this week. This is for those of you who are really serious about utilizing coaching to enhance your 2019 and beyond. There's 3 spots that I opened up, so you can use that link to grab one of those. And I would love to work in more depth with some of you. Yes, very helpful. Awesome. Hey, Morgan, good to see you on here. Angie, what's up, Angie? Good to see you on here. Divorce tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow's divorce day. D-Day. Melissa, good to see you. Absolutely. Oh, I love that, Robin. Absolutely helpful. Yes, but I don't know how to help my sister get over the guilt from her son's passing. So Suzanne, we're gonna dive more into that this week. I think specifically what's going to be, well, this whole thing, I'm teaching guilt like this because I want to really give proper context to it. So going into today, the next 3 days are going to be more into actual tools that you can use for yourself and tools that you can pass on to your sister. So these are all going to build on themselves. And I would encourage you to watch it, the whole series. And then what I might do is have a talk with your sister about it. Or if you feel really comfortable with it, share the entire series with her and encourage her to watch it from start to finish. Yes, helpful. Cool. Thanks, Maureen, for saying that. I'm the world's best apologizer. But you're improving on that, right, Christine? What questions do you all have? That is absolutely freeing. I was doing the best that I could do at that any given time. That's so awesome, Melissa. Yeah, I encourage you all to just think about that right now. Those of you who have had memories that have popped up, those of you who have had moments that have popped up, something that triggered something you haven't thought of for a long time, and you feel, because many of you probably felt some guilt pop up when I was remembering some of those things and explaining this to you. I definitely felt emotionally my physiology shift and go into this guilt. And I would encourage you all just around that, take a deep breath and just repeat to yourself, I was doing the best I could with what I had. I was doing the best I could with what I had. And you know what's even more powerful? I was doing the best I could with what I had, and give yourself a hug while you do it. Give yourself that little bit of extra love. I was doing the best I could with what I had, and give yourself a little extra hug. Linda, where does guilt fall into the 6 core needs? Several areas. And what about the drivers of all behaviors? So just to give you context, Linda and I were doing a discussion earlier about human needs and what drives the behavior all we do. And I teach this stuff more in depth at Unlock Your Greatness. But guilt is going to be a vehicle that we'll use to meet our needs, and which is part of the reason why we learn it. So everything we do it to try to meet our needs. And we may do things for positive reasons, and we may do things that are negative. Easy example is somebody who does does substances or something like that, does things that they know aren't helpful, but they're doing it and they know they shouldn't do it, but they do it because they're always doing things to try to meet their needs. And guilt can become a major way we learn to meet our needs, because we can feel so certain in our guilt. Many of us will go and default to guilt because we really love and care about the people that we feel guilty in relation to. I love my mom more than anything. And more than anything, I want to see her happy. I still want that more than just about anything. And so, which I'll get more into later this week. And so we would use guilt as a way to feel love and connection, because we would tell ourselves a story that if we weren't receiving love from someone else, and I want you all to write this down, because this might really clear some things up for a lot of you. We'll tell ourselves stories in the moments of, if I'm not receiving love from someone, right, then I feel guilty. I'm not doing something. I'm not behaving in a way. I'm not performing in a way. I'm not adequate. I'm not whatever it is. So we start to feel guilty. And we'll feel guilt because in the moment we're feeling guilty, it will help us justify, it will help us feel love. It helps us feel connected. It helps remind ourselves that we really love and care about those people. So guilt becomes a really prevalent thing, and we use it as a vehicle, as a tool, if you will, to meet our needs in a deeper level. Good question. Thank you. You bet, Suzanne. Exciting, this subject couldn't be more appropriate for me. You bet, Lisa. I'm looking forward to you being on here the whole week. Christine, yes. Awesome, Christine. I had a question, but you answered. Cool. I'll have to do some homework. You're very welcome, Melissa. Barbara, you're welcome. Linda, you're very welcome. Thanks for being on here. I wish I could redo some things over again. We can never go back, but we can only go forward. And see, here's the thing is, we may not be able to go back and change things, but what we can always do is we can take and extrapolate the lessons from those things, and we can do differently now and in the future. So how guilt ran your life in the past, it does not have to be a driver for now. It really doesn't have to be. So one of the things that we can do now, and that's why I said, is go back and do this. And if you had memories, instances popping up, do a healing moment for yourself. I was doing the best I could with what I had, and give yourself some love, give yourself a hug. It is so freeing. And then that will give you a space to start doing things differently in the future. Guilt stops messing me up. That's what we're working on this week, Jill. All right. I don't see any other questions. So we'll call it there. Thank you, everyone, for being on here today.